Hello and welcome everyone. It's Friday Eve. The Easter long weekend is so close. You can taste it. And for many of you, it means lots and lots of kid stuff. You know, like the Easter egg hunts and the chocolate bunnies, all the stuff of our childhood memories. But for the kids who were sent to the academy at Ivy Ridge, a private boarding school in upstate New York, childhood memories are now best revisited in a therapist's office. These kids, unbeknownst to their parents, spent their teen years locked up inside a veritable prison, subjected to untested psychological treatments, harsh physical abuse, and for many of them, sexual assault. Netflix recently blew the doors open on the torment and the emotional abuse that those kids suffered in a new docuseries called The Program: Cons, Cults, and Kidnapping. The Academy at Ivy Ridge was billed as a behavioral modification program for troubled teens. But the kids who arrived there, often taken from their own beds and transported in the middle of the night in handcuffs, they were met with a bizarre and strict regimen where going outdoors or even eye contact, that was forbidden. So was looking out the window. That is not a joke. They were not allowed to look out the window. And forget reporting back any of this garbage to your parents. No phone calls allowed. And all communications were monitored and edited. All attempts to reveal the truth to trusting families back home were met with demerits, points that yielded a longer stay at the school. Tonight in a Banfield exclusive, 4 former students of the Academy at Ivy Ridge are going to join me live and tell their stories in graphic detail. Also ahead, it is looking like it's not going to be much of a holiday weekend for Sean Diddy Combs either. He was supposed to be in the Bahamas right now with his twin teenage daughters, but that trip did not happen. And there is a veritable TikTok that's playing out in his life right now. Like at any moment, agents could be showing up with handcuffs and a federal indictment. Or maybe they won't. Because it's been over 3 days now since those highly unwelcome and unannounced Homeland Security agents paid a visit to his mansions in LA and Miami. Visits where the feds really tore those places apart. And we are learning tonight from a source close to law enforcement that there's a pretty good chance that Diddy's phones and any other electronics that he had physically on his person while he was at that private airport in Miami and talking to the feds, we have reports that those are likely in the hands of the feds right now. His personal stuff, the phones, the laptops, the tablets that you carry with you, yeah, likely the feds have those. You already know all about the civil lawsuits and the sexual abuse allegations that came beforehand. But 3 days after the raids, where exactly are those criminal charges? Will there even be any? Is it getting a little harder to argue with Sean Combs' lawyers when they complained of a, quote, rush to judgment and, quote, excessive show of force? One thing we do know, the pile-on from his rivals, that is gaining steam. I'm looking at you, Fiddy. More on that coming up as well. And speaking of justice, we are just 9 days away from WrestleMania. And some would say justice is finally catching up with Vince McMahon. Kind of an inopportune time. The founder and longtime frontman of the WWE is not facing charges, at least not tonight, but the sex crime allegations in a civil lawsuit would shock even Puff Daddy P. Diddy Sean Combs. And tonight, a blockbuster guest. She married into wrestling royalty, the Hart family of Canada. And she has her own long and painful history with Vince McMahon. Martha Hart, on her late husband, wrestling superstar Owen Hart, his superstar brother Bret Hart, and Vince McMahon's comeuppance, all straight ahead on this very, very busy Thursday night. Okay, we're going to begin tonight with news about another show. Actually, a show that is currently airing on Netflix and exposing widespread and horrifying abuses at a private boarding school in upstate New York. And what we're about to share with you tonight just might become evidence in the criminal investigation that was launched because of that show. The Netflix docuseries is called The Program: Cons, Cults, and Kidnapping. And it details firsthand accounts of what happened to the kids who were sent to the academy at Ivy Ridge. Sounds pretty nice. It was up in Ogdensburg, New York. But some of the students who were sent there decades ago returned to that abandoned structure to reveal the litany of sick and twisted abuses that were carried out against them when they were just teenagers. One of those students is the filmmaker herself, and her docuseries is now in the top 10 on Netflix. It details physical, sexual, psychological abuses of thousands of children, all wrapped up in the guise that it was tough love for troubled teens. Tough love that cost their unsuspecting parents upwards of $5,000 per month to have their kids there. That school promised discipline and a distraction-free learning on a scenic campus. It operated on a program that was based in earning points in order to leave the school. But something as innocent as looking out the window, not a joke here, looking out the window, or speaking to another student, God forbid, or even hinting to your own parents that there might be some abuses going on at the school, that would wipe out your points. And it would force you as a kid to stay in the program even longer. You getting where this is going, right? It would force parents to pay even more to, quote unquote, fix their troubled teenagers. To so many of the parents, the brochures seemed like it was just what their kids needed. But the program itself was a total farce. It was a lie. It didn't even have proper accreditation or trained teachers to give the kids legitimate diplomas. They didn't get them. They got pieces of paper. Many of them had to get GEDs later. And this is why the state shut this school down back in 2006. But if you ask the students, the state seemed kind of unaware of the physical torture and the mental anguish and even the sex abuse that these kids were suffering. For many of them, their harrowing ordeal began with a kidnapping from their very own home, often in the middle of the night. Here's a clip.
I got here at 3 a.m. and they said I was not allowed to talk anymore and you can never leave.
They were being treated like prisoners.
I had never done drugs in my entire life, but in order for me to graduate, I had to confess to using heroin, crack, cocaine, LSD.
They dehumanize the kids, that these kids are liars and manipulators. They use that to create compliance.
It's hard to comply with something that you know is wrong.
What the staff considered, quote, restraints, end quote, were more like actual body slams of kids. There were kids that were forced into untested cult-like seminars, supposedly meant to break them. And the only way out of the program was to actually just play along. But the further some kids got up the program, the further they actually rose up in the program, the more they themselves were forced to become abusers. Look at this list here. Just look at this list. The things that you were allowed to have if you went up in the program, talking, shaving, wearing your hair down, wearing makeup. You got to look out the window. You got an unpaid staff job, like working in the kitchen. And then you had to give the corrections to the lower levels. Here is how a student named Alexa described that exact experience.
I found a document that I wrote that kind of blew my mind because I have no memory of it. No memory of it. And I know for a fact that it probably happened more than once. But it was a statement of fact that I wrote because I restrained somebody.
By becoming an enforcer and doing it to others, that damages another part of yourself.
My first response was like, I can't. Like, that's not something that I can have in my brain now as far as like, man, I was actively hurting kids. Like, actively hurting kids as a kid. I'm 16 years old, at that point. And if I'm not assisting with a restraint, that's my program.
Some of the worst stories detailed staff members sexually assaulting those kids, and not just a few. Remarkably, when the students returned to the abandoned building, they discovered thousands of documents that were left behind inside that structure when the school shut down. The files are now in the hands of many of those students who were abused. But the local district attorney up there, well, he has opened up a criminal probe. Joining me now are 4 former students who lived through it all at the academy at Ivy Ridge. Jack Woolen, Chelsea Rosenkrantz, Steve Casimo, and Nick Chiofalo. Thank you so much to the 4 of you for being on the program. I know this is not easy stuff to relive, but I think it's important that you tell your stories and let people know exactly what the truth was about the school that you were all forced to attend. Chelsea, let me begin with you. You heard Alexa talking about rising in the program and then being forced to order other kids around and sometimes even physically punish them. Did you also have that same experience?
Yes. Basically, once you became an upper level, you were forced to restrain. I remember a time where they would put tampons in girls' mouths so that they wouldn't bite their lips because they were trying to, harm themselves. And basically, if we didn't do those things, then that was our program. We were dropped. We started all the way back from level 1. And most of us had already been there, 8-9 months. And
the last thing you would want was to extend your stay even another, a couple of days. Steve, your file was really thick, and apparently I'm told you didn't make it past level 2. What was your experience and the claims that, these staff members were just trying to break you kids?
My experience was I was very immature. I went into that place, had some social issues. So I went in there and tried to get accepted. And it didn't really work out too well for me. Some things in my childhood, me being a kid in that place was almost unbelievable. Was accused of lying a lot. So a lot of my peers didn't respect me, didn't like me. So that caused me to be an easy target. So yeah, I never got past 300 points. I can't remember ever going past 300. It was either my peers keeping me down or the staff or myself. It was being ADHD, fidgety, unable to sit still. That really worked against me in this place. And so eventually you give up.
I mean, I think about kids today with ADHD and all sorts of diagnoses who are getting, IEPs, individual education plans in their public schools, not being sent off to, prison-like military academies with not only mental and physical torture, but sexual abuse as well. Real quick, Steve, I just saw a picture, I think, was that your file, that incredibly thick document that we were showing? Have you had a chance to go through it? And if so, what was it like for you to see these documents?
That's actually, that's a really good question. I held that in my closet for a couple of years without touching. It wasn't until after the documentary release, I actually have it beside me, that's why I'm looking over, that I actually started going through it. And it brought back a lot of memories. It clarified some, and I got to really see how deceitful they were. The manipulation that they were doing to our parents, it's unreal. I got to see some of my psych evals from when I was 12 years old, which brought a lot of childhood memories back. I got to read some of my essays as well. There's even an essay there where I was just venting. It was at the time that I had said, forget it, I'm not doing this anymore. And I completely gave up. That really brought me right back and reminded me of where I was there, why I did what I did, when I did it. And it gave me my experience back per se. I remembered enough to be able to paint a picture.
What I learned from the documentary, and it really, is remarkable work from your fellow student and the documentary filmmaker as well, is that you were completely edited. First of all, no phone calls, no communication with your families at all. And at any moment when you did have any kind of visit or letter, it was monitored, it was edited. And if you said anything about this school, you would once again lose all your points and go back to the beginning, and it would just prolong the and I'm seeing you nodding. I mean, I saw it from the other students in the doc. I'm seeing it from you in real time, all four of you right now. Jack, you were there for the riot. It was in 2005. A lot of the boys finally said enough is enough. We're going to break out. It was literally like a prison, so it was something you physically had to break out from. And the videos were harrowing. I mean, it looked like a prison riot. Take me back and describe a little bit about that night.
That's a very good thing to start with, I guess. No, that night was very interesting. It was tense. Everybody within the dorms kind of knew that something was going on. Even the staff members knew something was going on, but the staff members thought that it was happening in the other dorms. So the majority of them were over there. So as the night went on, it was like electric in the air, and out of nowhere, the fire alarm got pulled. And from that point, it's like everyone at one time just became a single unit and just went crazy. Basically, there were kids running down the halls, trying to go down. They were running into different rooms, trying to kick out the grates on the window. Each of the windows in the dorm rooms, you could open them a little bit so you can get some air, but there was like a metal grate behind them. So you couldn't do that. So kids were going in, just kicking it to try and break out from there, and going out in the back and trying to get out of the fence and kicking out. Some people wound up running into the facility itself and running through the kitchen, running through the gym. And it was just chaos until they wound up rallying the majority of us into the gym. And when we wound up in the gym is kind of when a lot of the staff members kind of went a little overboard. I personally got hit in the ribs with a baseball bat by a staff member and held back by another staff member because I was going to get ready to fight. And it got out of hand when they wound up calling the cops, and the paramedics showed up to bring some of us to the hospital. I remember going to the front of the facility, and I was grabbed by the neck and slammed against the wall by the director. And he just asked, what do you think you're doing? And I just kind of looked at him and it's like, I'm going to the hospital, and just kind of let me go and walked away. And that whole time the paramedics are standing right there seeing this stuff. So it was a lot. It was a very, very intense night.
It was heartbreaking to read some of the news reports from back then, seeing that the authorities, law enforcement, responded, and some of the kids were escaping into the woods, literally running for their lives, and law enforcement brought them back and put them back in that school. Nick, the U.S. Sun newspaper has named Amy Ritchie, one of the staff members who worked there, and accused her of being a sexual predator. They interviewed multiple former students who said that Amy Ritchie sexually assaulted them. And I know that you also have the stories of sex assaults, and not just in the girls' dorms.
Yeah, that's that's completely right. It wasn't just isolated to this side for the girls. Unfortunately, it did also happen on the guys' side. The staff had their favorite targets, and when they had their targets and they had the kids that they hated, they made sure your life was hell. And unfortunately, I was one of those kids.
Do you have
hate
any
seeing that
specific
picture.
Stories? Was Amy Ritchie a person that abused you?
So, twice, I believe. It was kind of inadvertent, but at the same time, hearing the stories, I completely think it was on purpose. She was around a couple of times when I have gotten restrained by staff, and when she was around, if there was a male getting restrained, she made sure to lend a hand. And the way she would do so, she would position herself at around your hips, and she would always wrap an arm between the legs. Actually, if you look at the documentary, there is a scene where she is actively helping male staff restrain a male in the gymnasium we had in the main facility, and her arm goes right in between the legs. She did that to me. She grabbed a hold of something that was quite painful when she grabbed a hold of, and I will never forget. On top of that,
know, and yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, continue.
I was just saying, she's not the only staff member that would restrain the males that way. I had been restrained that way specifically by one staff member constantly, and I know I was not the only one he would restrain that way. When he would grab that region, it was more or less like he was trying to rip it off. But that same gentleman is also one that molested me in 2 other occasions as well. And it was a lot more than just him on the guy's side. I can name, other than him, 3 others that specifically targeted me for that experience that I am currently trying to deal with ever since I've decided to speak up about it.
And I want to be clear, this is, I don't want to put any of the 4 of you in a position where you don't want to reveal something. I only want you to say what you feel comfortable saying. But there are some unbelievable, just painful allegations that are made in the documentary about Amy Ritchie. And Steve, do you have additional examples of sex assaults or sex abuses that were perpetrated at that academy?
Honestly, I had nothing like that happen to me personally. And I never actually witnessed it myself.
And what about you, Jack?
As far as my experience when it came to the restraining thing, I had similar situations occur when I would be restrained, as Nick had mentioned. Most of those restraints weren't things that tended to happen in the main facility. Those were things that wound up occurring inside the no camera room. But as far as being aware of things, I'm pretty sure the majority of us knew that there were things going on, and it didn't really matter how many times we tried to say something or write something about it. If we wrote what they called a statement of fact about anything that happened on the girls' side, Amy was the one that those statement of facts went to, and nothing was ever done about it. Everything that we wrote was monitored by the admins. So,
and that's something that is so harrowing, that there was nothing you could do to inform your families of the truth of what was going on there without risk of being told you were going to spend months more. Chelsea, Alexa also told an incredible story in the documentary of who now it's alleged to be Amy Ritchie, who she alleges Amy would groom the female students by withholding affection. And then love bombing, and then withholding the affection, and then love bombing so much more that kids who were deprived of any kind of affection, even from their fellow students, who weren't allowed to look at each other, that the girls would be too afraid to say no to any of the sexual overt acts for fear that they would be once again isolated. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. Yes, that's what she would do.
Do you have any additional stories that you can add to that?
Well, she did that. She would rub your shoulders. She would, just touch, I guess. And, a lot of us, we didn't have our mothers there. So we were looking for it somewhere. And that, she was the highest up for us. So that was kind of, how she played that role. And she never did as much stuff to me, but I saw it. I would see her close the door with staff members sitting on her lap as she would rub their shoulders, or just even behind closed doors, because we couldn't technically tell anybody else, even the people that we were there with, because you couldn't talk to them.
I'm so sorry that the 4 of you went through what you went through it in such a formative time of your lives, and that you were deprived of the love you should have had from your families. And I'm sad for your families as well, that they seem to have been sold a bill of goods, hoodwinked, and almost in a cult-like way, sold a bill of goods that just wasn't true at all. And I'm very thankful that you all 4 have the courage and were brave enough to speak publicly about this evening. Thank you, all of you. I do appreciate it. And we're going to continue to cover this, because I think the investigation is only just beginning. Jack Woolen, Chelsea Rosenkrantz, Stephen Casamo, and Nick Chiafalo. I also just want to let our viewers know that Jack and Nick also have a new podcast called Porch Fix, where they're breaking the code of silence. That drops tomorrow on YouTube and Spotify. And you probably saw on your screen the sexual abuse hotline. If you're watching this and you have been a victim of sexual abuse, we encourage you to call the number on your screen, take a screen grab of that number, 1-800-656-4673, and report that abuse. And if you're a victim of abuse, at the academy at Ivy Ridge, by all means. I think don't even call that hotline alone. Call the hotline and then call the police and let them know, because there is a growing file that is building tonight. Coming up, the real reason that federal agents raced to the private airport in Miami where Sean Diddy Combs was about to take off on his private jet for Easter break with his kids. New revelations about the case and the critical evidence that encounter with Diddy may have actually yielded at that airport. Plus, the very specific thing that investigators did at Diddy's mansions before they started even searching. Is someone on the team of Diddy feeding the cops information? It's all next. Three days after federal agents spectacularly intercepted Sean Combs' plane at the Miami private airport, we are learning a lot more about what the feds were after and what they might have in their possession right now. And the top of that list, Diddy's personal cell phones. There are reports from the LA Times that law enforcement has seized his phone, or phones plural, and did so at the airport before he had a chance to board that private plane to the Bahamas. That is a picture from TMZ, and boy, is it a picture. Those are the feds talking to Diddy outside that plane that he did not get on. One source close to the investigation has told us, and I will repeat verbatim, they ran to the airport to catch him before he took off to do just that. So it is likely they got his phones. If they can do it to the mayor of New York City on the streets of Greenwich Village, grabbing them off Puffy should be a day in the park. Well, that's in reference to the FBI seizing New York Mayor Eric Adams' cell phone during an unrelated fundraising investigation back in November. And we're also learning a lot more information about what the feds did right before, during, and after those unbelievable raids on Sean Combs' two mansions, East Coast and West Coast. Source tells TMZ that the first thing the agents did when they arrived at Combs' Los Angeles home was to make a beeline for his home security system. They reportedly disabled his cameras and took the hard drive to make sure that there was no video evidence left behind of the raid itself. According to the source, the agents appeared to know where everything was located before they even got there, as if someone had described the layout to them ahead of time. The agents set up a command post outside of the house, and the agents would bring out evidence and tag it and bag it and then go back in for more. And we saw that. This went on for hours and hours. There were some theories that Combs may have been tipped off about the raids ahead of time and that that's why he was getting on a plane, but that does not seem to comport with all the other facts in the case. Reports say that when the agents arrived at the LA mansion, his two adult sons were, quote, shocked and frightened. One of them was apparently in the shower, and the other was half-dressed when the agents stormed in and then pointed lasers at them. Diddy's sons and two other associates were cuffed and led out of the house before the search, and then afterwards were released. The witnesses saw investigators remove several electronic devices from the home, including multiple hard drives. We've already heard that the feds were interested in looking at email and text and itineraries that might be stored on any electronic devices. They may also be collecting information about Sean Combs' circle of associates, including this woman, Christina Coram. According to a lawsuit filed against Diddy by Rodney Lil Rod Jones, Christina Coram was Diddy's chief of staff and day-to-day manager. Jones alleges that Christina Coram required all of Combs' employees to walk around with a fanny pack or a pouch full of drugs so that Combs could always, quote, get his drug of choice. Jones also accuses Coram of ordering sex workers and prostitutes for Mr. Combs. And in the lawsuit, Jones calls Christina Coram, quote, the Ghislaine Maxwell to Combs' Jeffrey Epstein, end quote. One of the alleged sex workers named in Jones' lawsuit is Daphne Joy. And that's Daphne Joy there. She is an OnlyFans creator, but Joy is also the ex-girlfriend of rapper 50 Cent. There she is with 50. She's also the mother of 50's 11-year-old son. And yesterday, 50 Cent posted photos of himself smoking a cigar in the rain with the caption that said, quote, I'll just read it verbatim. I didn't know you was a sex worker, you little sex worker, LOL. Yo, this blank is a movie. That's Diddy. Sorry, that's Fiddy. Rhymes with Diddy. TMZ is also reporting that the feds are issuing subpoenas to any companies that may have done business with Diddy, including his private charter jet, phone providers, and computer companies. Investigators are reportedly trying to learn who flew on Diddy's dime and to where. I want to bring in our friend Steve Helling. He's a senior writer for the New York Post. He's also really, really good at digging up stuff. Steve, welcome back. Did you ever think we were going to have this conversation? And maybe you're going to say yes. Maybe you're going to say, I always thought we'd have a conversation. I just didn't think we'd have this conversation about Diddy.
I mean, nobody who knew anything about him is completely shocked by this. You know, we all knew that there was stuff going on with him. You know, I think we're surprised at the depth of it and how many people were involved and all of that. And, you know, none of us expected this raid the other night or the other day, and neither did Diddy. You know, he didn't expect it either. I know that there's all this rumor that he did, but he was taken by surprise as well.
So what do you make of this idea that the agents knew exactly where to go, almost like they had the blueprint? Is there some chatter that there's an insider?
Well, you know, they are kind of following up on all of this due to these civil suits that are filed against him. And obviously the witnesses and the alleged victims in those cases would have been in that house, would have been in those mansions, would have known where things were, and presumably would have told that to the authorities. So I'm not surprised that they knew exactly where to go. And that certainly bolsters their case that they were, you know, looking for specific and concrete evidence that they had been told about before.
Yeah. What do you make of Fiddy? 50 Cent is piling on. And lots of people have their rumors about Fiddy too. And I hate to say, you know, watch it if you're living in a glass house. But what do you think is going to come of this?
Well, it depends on who comes forward and what they come forward with when it comes to him. You know, the bottom line is that you can't really throw a lot of shade if you've been doing things yourself. And, you know, there have been allegations that have come out even today that, you know, maybe 50 Cent isn't as clean and squeaky clean as he's trying to pretend like he is. Time will tell on that one. But the bottom line is that, you know, this is fascinating, and it will be interesting to see how deep it goes.
Fiddy was posting on Insta today, just to sort of button this up, that Fiddy and Diddy. Okay, so Fiddy's posting that Diddy reportedly had secret cameras in every room and alleged that blackmail tapes exist of all of his famous party guests. Ooh. All right, so make an appointment because I think the story's continuing. Steve Helling, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, still to come. With WrestleMania actually just days away, there is this black cloud that's hanging over the WWE. But the blockbuster sex trafficking allegations, it ain't the first massive controversy for Vince McMahon and his company. Nearly 25 years ago, one of the WWE's biggest stars, Owen Hart, tragically fell 78 feet to his death while performing a daring wrestling stunt. Tonight, his widow, Martha Hart, is with me. Did the reckless nature of McMahon and the WWE contribute to Owen Hart's death? That's next. Becky Lynch is a megastar in the world of wrestling, and in 9 days, she could blow up even bigger. That's when she competes for the Women's WWE Championship during WrestleMania. It is like a mecca for wrestling fans, but Becky is doing something that some people say is a lot more dangerous than being in the ring. She's talking out loud about Vince McMahon and the blockbuster sex trafficking allegations that he's facing. Here she is on the Sports Media Podcast this week.
They are horrendous allegations. They're horrendous. And it's so hard to listen to and reconcile with because you don't know that person. the person that the person that I've experienced was like a granddad, you know, like he, at times a very grumpy granddad, and one that you're frustrated with, but one that was so supportive of me and my family and of my career, and encouraging and understanding as well at times.
After the lawsuit went public, McMahon resigned from the WWE and its parent company in January. Members of his family still work for the company, and the McMahon name still looms large over the WWE. Another name that's synonymous with the business of wrestling is Hart, as in Bret and Owen Hart, two of the biggest WWE stars of the 80s and the 90s. Bret has spoken out against McMahon, calling him disgusting, but Owen can't do that. Owen died tragically in 1999 during a televised WWE event. While performing a very risky stunt, Owen fell 78 feet to the ring below, which caused blunt force trauma to his chest. The WWE eventually reached a multi-million-dollar settlement with Owen's wife and his parents, which led to the creation of the Owen Hart Foundation, an organization that has helped so many people in need. Earlier today, I spoke with Owen Hart's widow, Dr. Martha Hart, about the new allegations against McMahon and about her husband's death. Martha, thank you very much for, coming and talking to me, because I know that you don't do a lot of these interviews. I wanted to get your reaction when you heard about the blockbuster allegations in the lawsuit again, to Vince.
Yes, well, Ashleigh, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. And you're right, I was a little reluctant to come on, but I thought it's such an important topic that I just wanted to be able to contribute to that.
And you're a unique character. You live in Canada. You watch from afar, but you watch. Mm-hmm. You know what's going on. You've watched the WWE for decades. Were you surprised when you heard the details in that lawsuit?
No, I was not surprised when I heard there was yet another lawsuit. Over the years, the WWE, they've had many lawsuits and they've had a lot of bad press. And I tell you, I read all of the 67 pages in that complaint, and it is absolutely horrific. And I have to say that, the level of wickedness that's described is beyond the pale in that complaint. And anyone with a shred of humanity would find the indignant acts just incomprehensible, frankly. So it wasn't a shock that there was another lawsuit, but the level of, I guess, depravity, there certainly was. And, I'm a doctor in mental health, and I'm also the founder and director of the Owen Hart Foundation. So no matter what hat I'm wearing, I always work with at-risk people. And I can tell you that anyone that takes advantage of a vulnerable person is the most despicable type of person, because these are people that need to be supported and protected, not exploited. And by Janelle Grant's own admission, she was a vulnerable person. She was unemployed. Her parents had passed away. She was suffering with grief. And she was also just on the cusp of financial collapse. So these are all the makings of a very vulnerable person.
After your late husband died tragically in the ring, and Owen, for those who maybe don't know as much about wrestling, was a superstar, just like his brother Bret. Did you have acrimony in the dealings with the WWE, and in particular with Vince McMahon, to a point where you have insight into the actual man himself and not the character we see on TV?
Well, I did go toe-to-toe twice with Vince McMahon, Linda McMahon, and their company. And it was a David and Goliath battle. And I'll tell you that it was a tooth and nail fight. And they will stop at nothing to protect themselves, for sure. They run a $1 billion company, and in doing that, they're able to, like a lot of big companies, they're able to delay cases, they're able to muddy the waters, they're able to detract and take everything away from the case at hand. And so in that sense, they can hire the best lawyers, and they have that might on their side. And a lot of times what happens with wealthy people, their wealth, they feel has no bounds. And so then they have no boundaries. And they feel that they can do anything and get away with anything.
I have like 10 seconds left. Do you have any advice for Janelle Grant?
I would say to just stay the course, and her claim is very credible, and I would be steadfast in my convictions and, don't back down.
Can't thank you enough, Martha Hart. It's nice to meet you, and I really appreciate you making this trip and coming on live with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, if you were with me last night, you know about this bizarre trend in New York City. Young women just getting punched out of the blue by complete strangers. Or is it stranger? One of the women who joined me last night went right to the police after the show, and we have an update on what she found out. That's next.
Think you have GA? Don't wait. Treatments are available. Ask a retina specialist about FDA-approved treatments for GA and go to GAWon'tWait.com.
We don't know who they are or why they're doing it, but for some reason, random men are punching random women on the streets of New York City. Last night on this show, Sarah Harvard detailed her attack. This was last night. She was assaulted on the Lower East Side and says that she knows personally 15 other women who were randomly attacked in the same way. And tonight we have an update. Sarah and a few of the other victims that she's now allied with, same kind of attacks they've undergone in New York City. They're joining forces and they're turning over pictures of a man who matches the description of their serial puncher so that they can compare against surveillance videos that are taken at the times of their assaults. Sarah told us that the police are now hopeful that the photos and the first-hand accounts are going to lead to a positive identification of an attacker. At least one man has already been arrested in New York, but Sarah told us that the man they arrested right there is not the same person who punched her. So the investigation continues. Maybe we're talking about multiple men. Dozens of shocked women have posted social media videos showing their injuries after being sucker punched, and our fingers are crossed that they find the man or men who are out there doing this. That's all the time we have tonight. Stick around. One more.